the sails of the sea are over the wild briny pool. For the ocean and different sails upon high is just like a bird on the wing. And when the shadows of evening grow nigh, he'll sail to my window and sing. Come take a trip in my airship. Come take a sail on the stars. Come have a ride around Venus. Come have a spin around Mars. No one to watch while we're busy. No one to see while we school. Come take a trip in my airship and we'll visit the man in the moon.
Hey, hi, loyal airmen. This is Captain Ron Fortier speaking to you from the good ship, Airship27. And joining me for podcast number 68 is our chief engineer, Rob Davis. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great. Are you sure it's 68?
Yeah. This is 68. See, he's pulling a fast one on me now. What switches every now and then is we'll get a little confused of who starts the show or whatever. But I do know that this month, which is October, and it's a good month for us here at Airship 27, as we'll explain in a little while. But Rob gets the privilege of starting with the bad joke of the month.
Yeah, so your chief engineer is gonna get this thing rolling.
Get this stinker out there, buddy.
I don't know if you'll be rolling on the floor laughing, but I hope so.
All right. What do you got for us?
Well, I read this story in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. There was a St. Louis lawyer who went duck hunting in rural North Missouri. He shot and dropped a bird, but it fell into a farmer's field on the other side of the fence. As the lawyer climbed over the fence, an elderly farmer drove up on his tractor and asked him what he was doing. The litigator responded, "I shot a duck and it fell in this field and now I'm going to go retrieve it." The old farmer replied, "This is my property and you are not coming over here." The indignant lawyer said, "I am one of the best trial lawyers in the West. And if you don't let me, I'll sue you and take everything." The old farmer smiled and said, "Apparently you don't know we settle disputes in North Missouri. We settle small disagreements like this with the 3-kick rule." The lawyer replied, "What's the 3-kick rule?" The farmer said, "Well, because the dispute occurs on my land, I get to go first. I kick you 3 times, and then you kick me 3 times, and so on, back and forth until somebody gives up." The attorney quickly thought about the proposal and decided that he could easily take the old codger. He agreed to abide by the local custom. So the old farmer slowly climbed down from his tractor, walked up to the attorney. His first kick planted the toe of his heavy steel-toed work boot into the lawyer's groin and dropped him to his knees. His second kick to the midriff sent the lawyer's last meal gushing from his mouth. The lawyer was on all fours when the farmer's third kick to his rear end sent him face first into a fresh cow pie. The lawyer summoned every bit of his will and remaining strength and very slowly managed to get to his feet. Wiping his face with the arm of his jacket, he said, "Okay, you old fart, now it's my turn." The old farmer smiled and said, "Nah, I give up. You can have the duck."
Oh, the lawyers aren't as smart as they think they are, huh?
No. I think he lost that trial. Oh, my.
Smokes and a half. Yeah. Hey, anyways, before we get too much further, winter has arrived.
Yeah, I misread that first line. It says released since our last snow, but it says released since our last show. But you sent some snow my way.
Yeah, which was very welcome for us here in Colorado.
Yeah.
If you loyal airmen, I'm sure this has been national news now for a couple of weeks, but the forest fires here in Colorado started.
Yeah.
Well, they started in August, the first week of August. We're talking almost 3 full months of forest fires now, right? And I happen to live in northern Colorado, in Fort Collins, the foothills of the what is it, the Rocky Mountain National Park.
Right.
This park is behind us by 20, 30 miles. And that's been the home of the Cameron Peak Fire, which now has the record of being the biggest forest fire to hit the state. At the same time this was going on, there were forest fires down south to the west of the mountains and everything else.
Right.
Canyon Peak alone took out over, I think it was like 28,000 acres of land. Some 40, 50 private residents. People lost their homes, beautiful places, and that's not even to count the rest of the state. But after all this time, and there were days when the smoke would come up from the hills, come down from the hills, all right, because the northern Canadian winds would blow them down.
Yeah, it blows down your way. Yeah.
It cover the city of Fort Collins like a blanket, a black blanket. Midday, it was pitch black out with ash falling like black snow.
Yeah.
Your cars,
and eclipse along with some ash falling from the sky.
I mean, yeah, and we trying to stay on top of this. I've had my car air filter changed, and we had to have the air filter in the house changed and all that stuff. It was horrible. You want to tell you, it looked apocalyptic to some points when you see this kind of stuff. So anyways, the good news, answered prayer for all of us, was a winter front moved in from the Canadians and basically covered the state last night and all day today in a snow, which we got probably about a foot here in Fort Collins, and most of the big fires have now been buried under this layer of white. We're watching the news, and it's pretty much put a damper on it. But as you all know, those kind of fires, they're going to take a wait and see attitude. So there will be flare-ups. We're still in that period of time. But for the most part, I think most of the damage is done. I think they're pretty much going to have them contained by the end of this coming weekend. So again, thank the good Lord for the snow. Now, it moving eastward nailed Rob. He wasn't expecting it. When our you thought it was going to go past the north.
I was the forecast yesterday, the one that I saw yesterday earlier in the day, said that northwest Missouri was going to get about 3 inches, and that would just skirt past us. Well, I got up this morning and was looking at my email, and I thought, I'll just check the weather and see what's going on, and it said, up to 1 inch in our area, and just 30, 40 miles to the west, we're going to get up to 3 inches, and Kansas City was going to get nailed. So, I mean, this is kind of early for us here in the middle of the United States. We don't usually see snows until November or December at the earliest, and so every time we get the first snow, everybody forgets from year to year how to drive on it. So that there's going to be all kinds of craziness out there. Now I considered whether I should do it or not, but I actually went. I had a couple of things I had to go to the post office in town to mail, so I went in and did that. I ended up only sending one of them because the second one was an envelope, and I dropped it in the snow, and it got all wet.
All wet.
So. Now, the stuff that was inside of it, I actually put it in a plastic sleeve. It's actually some original art that I'm sending to someone, to one of our writers from the latest Sherlock Holmes book. Yeah. He wanted the illustrations from his story, so he bought them from me, and I was going to send them off today. But since the envelope got wet, I didn't really want to put it in the slot at the post office because it'd be wet and it might come apart. It
would weaken the paper, right? Yeah.
So what I did was I went ahead and bought the postage, put it on there, brought it home, and I put tape on it. I actually had it on the dash so the defroster would dry it out. But on all the seams I put tape on it so it should hold together, and I'll try and get it out to him if he's watching this. Yeah, it'll go out tomorrow.
Okay.
instead of today. And today is what, the 26th of October.
Right. Hey, we're going to get back to our agenda. I want to, again, as ever, thank everybody who's following the show. Again, episode 67 just crossed the 100 viewer mark over the weekend, which again amazes me to no end. I'm really grateful for all of you taking the time to share an hour with us. And we wanted to get this one in before the end of the month, because that's always our schedule, to get one done a month. And the reason we're almost to the end of the month is because, as it turned out, we got 3 books out in October, which if you've been following us all year long, you know it's been hit or miss. We've had a couple of months where we didn't get anything out. So this October turned out to be a very good month for us. And so we're going to get right into it. I'll start with the first one, and we'll let you know what came out since our last show. All right. Number 1 was Executive Gambit by writer Wayne Carey. Now, this is a modern-day spy thriller we talked about during our last show. It's very much like a classic Brad Thor or Tom Clancy adventure novel. So you can really label this one new pulp. Both the president and the vice president are assassinated in 2 bombings, and the hunt is on for a terrorist organization responsible. Now, Rob provided both the interior illustrations and the cover, and a tip of the fedora to the modern paperback styling he put on this. I know for a fact Wayne was really taken when he finally saw it, and we, because we put his name up in big block letters with the title, right? And
like Tom Clancy, you know.
Yeah,
it says Wayne Carey.
He's having a field day, and as he should, It is really a good thriller. It really is. Once you start getting into reading
the heck out of it.
Yeah. So who knows? I mean, maybe we'll be seeing more of those in the future from some of our writers, which I don't discount at all. One of our newest writers, Rob, is a gentleman who's worked for other companies, new pulp companies, and that's Teal James Glenn. Okay, I want to make sure I don't say it the right way. But he's written several modern thrillers featuring a character called John Shadow. And we're in the process right now of putting together illustrations for one of his novels called Killing Shadows. And if people like Executive Gambit, that's something they want to keep an eye out for. It's coming our way relatively soon. All right. So what was the second title that we got out this month, Rob?
The second we got out was Jenna Coyne Mysteries by Robert Ricci. This is the kickoff of a brand new series featuring Jenna Coyne, a resident of Boston's North End, and her boyfriend, Police Sergeant Conrad Martin. In this first book, there are 2 complete stories, each telling how a woman working for a sleazy insurance company ends up being an amateur detective. Put my teeth in a little better next time. Jenna Coyne is a wonderful character, much like an adult Nancy Drew, and Ricci, a Boston resident, knows his locale by heart. Artist Jason Wren delivers his first interior work for Airship 27, and they are all terrific. While our old reliable Ted Hammond provides a beautiful cover, it's an homage to an old 40s Nancy Drew movie poster.
Yep. Hey, again, Ted always knocks it out of the park, but I am really excited about Jason Wren. I'm sure all loyal airmen get a little tired of our plea, begging for artists or whatever. And along came Jason earlier this year and said, yeah, I'd like to work for you guys. And so I happen to have, these 2 stories that make up this one book together. And Jason sent me samples of his artwork. And when I saw it, I realized, this kid could pull it off. He could do this. So we gave him the assignment. And he was very, very happy with it. Liked the stories, loved the stories, developed the characters visually very well, and then turned in those great illustrations. And so to let all of you know, Jason no sooner finished those where, I try not to jump on their backs too severely, all right? But having him on board and being grateful to do so, I immediately afterwards, said, well, have you any thoughts of doing another one for us? And if so he got back to me basically politely and said, what do you got in mind? And I thought, this was a modern day mystery, as we talked about, Nancy Drew and Miss Marple, those kind of things. I said, so let's see if he wants to stretch his artistic wings. And I offered him the illustrations for the third volume of The Masked Rider, Tales of the Wild West.
Uh-huh.
And I no sooner sent out the email, I think it came back to me within 5 minutes. Westerns, cowboys, I'm in. So Jason Wren, thank you so much for a gallant debut at Airship 27, and we've already seen a couple of his illustrations for the Masked Rider volume. So thank you so much for that. All right. So now the third and final, but not least, release of October 2020, the year we'll never forget. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective Volume 16. This volume is of our best-selling series, features a short story by Watson, 2 shorts by Greg Hatcher, and a full-length novella by Lee Houston Jr. Rob, as always, provided the interior illustrations and a rather unique cover homage to Italian artist Ugo Mantegna, or Mantegna.
Montania.
Right.
But, yeah,
who knows? Italian. I don't. Okay. In 1948, Mantegna illustrated Doyle's original story, The Sign of the Four, for an Italian edition. In that project, he did a pen and ink sketch of Holmes standing and playing his violin while next to him, Dr. Watson stretches out on a sofa. The figures are what we call free-floating with no background to them at all. Rob redrew the actual sketch and then proceeded to fill in the background with the classic 221B apartment these fictional characters reside in. Then he colored it, and thus the cover was born. And I am so thrilled with how it all came out. And you use that background from what, a museum exhibition?
There's actually a museum in London, and on I guess it's on Baker Street above. There's a museum. There's a bookstore or whatever it is. There's a downstairs, and then 221B is upstairs, and it's an actual museum recreating all the rooms from the 21B digs. So and it's got, I've found pictures online. I've actually got a book that's got a few pictures from it as well. But if you do a search on Google for 221B Baker Street, it's some of those pictures will come up, or if you do one for Sherlock Holmes, some of those will pop up then as well. But I've used those same pictures over and over again for some of the illustrations that I've done, and now this cover, and it comes in real handy, and they've got a lot of different things that are mentioned in the stories, like their knife that's stabbed into, I think it's the mantelpiece, holding down a piece of paper, and there's a slipper with the tobacco stuck in the toe,
the Persian slipper, yes.
Oh yeah, all that stuff from the stories. So it's kind of fun. Plus, I also have some photos from there was an exhibit of some of that type of stuff as well that was at the St. Louis Science Center a few years ago that the family and I went to see, and it has some of the same kinds of things in it. They're not exactly the same, but it's some of the same type of setup. Plus, it had a little detective story through it that you were trying to solve, which was kind of fun as well. So there's interesting stuff like that out there if you do a little search for it. But that's cool. I tried to base mine just on those. The ones from that museum.
Now, two things else I want to add, talking about that cover, because it was a lot of fun. And as ever, I'm fully expecting that once we got it out, which was the weekend, over the past weekend, I have to believe sales are going to start flying through the roof. They always do. This series, we can't put out enough of them as it is. Okay. Sherlock Holmes fans are loyal to a fault. Anyways, so the concept, I had seen this illustration, many, many times online. And that's when the cue came up, this would make a great cover. And got Rob involved. Rob liked the idea. And for those of you who want to see this happen piecemeal, be sure to check out my blog this coming Friday, www.airship27.com, where I show you one step at a time how the actual cover, evolved. But at the same time, once Rob was actually working on it and I was putting my blog together, it got to me that I didn't know the artist's name.
Right.
And it was like one of those things where I'm thinking to myself, well, that's really not right, because when you do those kind of homages, swipes, or whatever, it's only right that you credit the original artist, okay? And so I go to sleep that night, and I wake up the next morning. It's one of thing where your brain, first thing you're having that cup of coffee, and my brain goes, Ron, the web, the international throughout the world web.
Right.
So I immediately get on the Airship 27 page, my Facebook page, and of course the Pulp Factory page with a reproduction of Mr. Matania's illustration, basically saying, we're doing something with this, but who is the artist? Because his signature's there, but the reproduction, when you blow it up,
you can't read it. You can't read it.
I think it was all at 10 minutes. We had like 4 or 5 people. Oh, that's Ugo Matania. He's an Italian artist. He did blah, blah. And there it was. There was all that information. Yep. Once again, showing you the vastness that's out there at your fingertips in the world we live today. It's mind-boggling sometimes. So yeah. So anyways, hey, please check out all 3 of these books. We really, really are proud of each and every one of them. We think they're unique in and of their own way, and we hope, as ever, you guys will enjoy them to the max. So, Rob, why don't you take paragraph 1 of what's coming next?
What's coming next? For the novels, we first have Mark Justice's The Dead Sheriff, Volume 4, Purity, as written by Michael House. Again, this is
excuse me, I miswrote
Housel.
that.
You left the L off.
I left the L off. Sorry,
I read
Mike.
it exactly as written. It's Housel. Yeah. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah.
My bad. Okay. Again, this is our Keeping Alive the Weird Western series created by the late Mark Justice. Michael's book is fantastic, and I did all the interior illustrations.
We've been keeping Rob busy this year.
All we are waiting. Yeah, that's why we need more artists, please. All we're waiting on now is the cover by artist Michael Youngblood, and we are off to the presses. Guys, we have everything else done. All we're waiting for is Michael's cover, because we put the book together. I finished up the illustrations. It's all we sent it off to the proofreader. Then once that was done, we sent it off to all the authors. The author, Michael Housel, and it's all come back proofed and ready to go. And we're just waiting on Michael. As in every case when we work with artists, sometimes they are busy and they can't get right back to us, and we understand that. So we wait until they can bring the artwork to us or send the artwork to us. So we're waiting on this one kind of impatiently. We kind of like to get this one out.
The thing is, you recall, and I do want to mention, Michael worked in the drawing itself. He got the composition, and I don't know if you remember, he sent us the actual drawing for the cover. So we've seen the composition, and it's great. It's what we wanted. Where we're waiting now is, and Michael's very good at this. He's very good at digital coloring, but obviously it takes a little bit longer and some finesse involved with that. Right, so that's basically the second half of finishing that cover. And once he has the coloring finished on it, I'm sure he'll be sending it to me and Rob, and then Rob puts on the heading, the logos, and that's it. Off to Amazon.
This being a series, almost everything is set up already. The logo's already set up. Sometimes I have to move some elements around in order to work with the image that I'm sent. But generally, the logo is set in place, and it's just a matter of putting in the writer's name and the name of the story. Or if it's the kind of art that if we put anything on it, it's going to spoil it. We'll we'll just put the logo and then go with that. So hopefully
Yeah, right,
he'll have
right.
that
You know,
into the
and
show.
I just want to digress just a little bit. I mean, this series has become personal, personal to you and me both, because we've gotten to know Mark's wife, Norma Kay, very well over the last couple of years since we started continuing her husband's legacy with the Dead Sheriff series. And it got me thinking just recently because, in the process of us doing the Sherlock Holmes, we're also now getting ready to put out book 4 of The Dead Sheriff. And I've already got writer Michael Panush of California coming up with a 5th novel for The Dead Sheriff, which we hope to get out next year. So, voila, that series is continuing, and I eat that character, all right? And it got me thinking, Rob, recently about, as creators, you and I, right, is what is it, that we long for in what we do creatively? And I think there's a part of that is to be remembered in some way or not, all right?
Yeah.
But I think what the insight I had about all this was basically, it's not so much, I think that in 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now, right, people even remember my name. I just think it'll be amazing to have a legacy like Doyle did with Sherlock Holmes, or Burroughs did with Tarzan, or Ian Fleming did with James Bond, all right?
Right.
Or so the idea being is, it's amazing that the characters live on, all right, that they created, not so much even their names, all right?
Right.
And wouldn't it be wild if in 20, 30, 40 years when you and I are gone or whatever, right, somebody continues The Dead Sheriff? Without any connection or knows who Mark Justice was or whatever, okay?
Yeah.
But the character himself finds his way into our consciousness, our social consciousness, our literary community.
That would be cool. Yeah, that would be really cool.
Amazing. Yeah, this food for thought out there, folks. Just wanted to share it with you. All right, so then the second novel that, again, is going to be one of these that's very, very on the cusp right now. I think it'll probably be the next thing we release, unless Michael Youngblood sends that cover in, and that's Alice in Neverland. All right. Now, this is a new novel by one of our regulars, R.A. Jones, the writer, which has Alice from Alice in Wonderland ending up in Neverland and meeting Peter Pan for a very fun-filled adventure together. Ted Hammond's already done a truly gorgeous, beautiful, colorful cover for this. And my dear buddy, Gary Cotto from Hawaii, who I do Mr. Jigsaw with, has just finished the 9 interior illustrations, which are in the mail on their way to Rob, and copies are sent to me. So as you can see, once Rob gets them, it becomes a case of putting the illustrations in, putting together a PDF of the final book, and then we'll find someone to proofread it for us. Then eventually RA will get to look at it one last time, and off to the presses it goes.
Generally, RA doesn't look them over very carefully. He pretty much trusts us. I think he's one of those kind of creators, I've done it, it's yours now, move on with it. But I send it to him anyway. And sometimes he's kind of read it over. He kind of looked through it and he goes, "Yeah, it looks fine,"
But now I'm checking the mail every day because Gary called us last week and said that they were on their way, and having love
to know with me too.
Right, and I picked Gary because people, fans of ours, will know that many years ago, for the old Malibu Comics, they had started a subsidiary line, Rob, called Adventure Comics, and Gary and I actually did a new Peter Pan comic for them. That was a 2-parter, and then they eventually collected it all together. And Gary did such a great job with Peter Pan, The Lost Boys, Neverland, and everything else. So even as I was reading and editing, Alice in Neverland, I knew Gary was going to be the guy to do this. And he absolutely had a ball reading RJ's book. So, again, something else for all of you to look out there novel-wise. Rob, what's coming as far as anthologies are concerned?
Okay, after that, as for anthologies, we have Bass Reeves, Frontier Marshal, Volume 4, with stories in it from Mel Odom, Terry Alexander, Derek Ferguson, and Ron. I've already finished the interior illustrations, and I finished the cover.
Yeah, it's a swap around this time. It's
a swap. Yeah,
around, right?
Yeah, because the issue, I think 1, 2, and 3, I did the interiors for, but Howard expressed an interest in wanting to do it because what was it? His dad's favorite. Loved the character of Bass Reeves, and he thought it'd be kind of cool if he could do that. So we said, well, sure, yeah, go ahead. And so he's working on those now. And hopefully, we haven't seen anything from him in a little bit, but I think he's been pretty busy lately. But he should be getting those to us before too long. So it's third in the queue for what's coming up next. And
after
what's after that?
It should be followed by the Musketeers' New Adventures, with 2 short stories by Paul Beal and Alan Porter, and a full-length novella by Joel Jenkins. Now, Ed Cotto has turned in almost half of the illustrations, and believe me, they're gorgeous. And we are delighted to finally announce that artist Adam Shaw has taken on the cover assignment. The cover composition is inspired by an old Musketeer drawing by the late comic book artist Gene Day, and was inked by Ron Sutton. Now, when I saw this, I went to Ron and asked permission to show it to Adam, and he agreed immediately. Adam was then inspired by the picture that Gene and Ron had done together and did his own composition.
Which he always does.
Yeah, with that inspiration, and it came out looking fantastic. And this, of course, as you know, all of you know, we've talked about for several episodes, this is new stories of Alexander Dumas's classic characters, the Three Musketeers. And we had a ball doing that, and I've already got interest in people who want to write for a second volume once we get this. So again, Ed has been very meticulous in his research, in his illustrations, drawing the uniforms, et cetera, et cetera. And so again, we're really looking forward to that. And finally, Rob.
Okay, after several years, we finally put together a second volume of All American Sports Stories, and I currently have this one on my drawing board. I've read the first few pages of the first story. I haven't done any thumbnails yet, but as I always do, I'll read through the stories, do thumbnails of where each illustration, come back and draw each one of those. But I've just gotten started. It's on the drawing board now. So anyway, this one reprints a boxing novella by Derek Ferguson, which is then followed by a short baseball yarn by Dexter Fabi. And finally, Ron provides a college football story set in 1968. No cover artist has been set for this one yet. And after that, or do you have some comments that you want to make on this one?
I will,
because I think there's an interesting story, I believe, behind your particular story in this one, if I recall.
Right. Mine for sure. and this basically all comes together because we had mentioned way back, episodes back, somebody had asked us in a question at the end of an episode about were there any disappointments with us in some of the titles that we launched that we wanted to get out and whatever. And I mentioned the fact that we'd only ever done the first volume of All American Sports Stories, and it always bothered me that we couldn't get a second volume out. Well, one of our dear friends and one of the best writers in the business, Derek Ferguson, who listens and enjoys, the show on a regular basis, heard that. And lo and behold, I get an email from Derek. Now, several years back, Paul Bishop had created a boxing series called Fight Card.
Right.
And Derek had written a novella for him because that's all they were. They were short, like chapter book novellas.
Right. Yeah.
You had a bunch of people writing them, and they had a house name and whatever. But the kicker was, what they did was they did traditional publishing, Rob. So they went to a publisher and paid for X number of copies to get done. So it wasn't on demand. And so once that print run was gone, they were gone.
That's it.
Okay. Well, Derek wrote a story called Brooklyn Beatdown. all right, about a local black boxer in Brooklyn. And it's a fantastically great story, good boxing story, and all the iconic tropes of boxing tales. But now it's gone. It's gone from Fight Card. The rights revert back to Derek. And so he questions me about, well, would you consider reprinting Brooklyn Beatdown in All-American Sports Stories? And I jumped at the chance because here we go. This will fill up 30,000 words. We want 60,000. So it fills up half of our second volume immediately, and we will keep it in print. All right. In fact, my thoughts right now is Brooklyn Beatdown will be the cover image for this volume.
Yeah.
It's the novella, the biggest part of the story. Okay.
Well,
so
you can do some pretty dramatic stuff with fights. There's swinging and there's some other stuff goes on in this story too, as I found out reading it. But it starts off with a slam bang fight right at the beginning. So
you
starts
can
right
tell,
in.
You can tell Derek's a boxing fan, so
he huge boxing fan.
He puts his heart and soul into it. So now, okay. So what's the second half of the book? And at the last time, you and I had been to the Windy City Paper and Pulp show. Illinois-based young Dexter Farby showed up. Now, Dexter's, again, another great writer. He's done Sherlock Holmes for us and a couple of other things. And so his basic thing was, well, what do you guys need? What can I do to help you out? And I immediately said, give me a sports story. And so he gives me this baseball story. And it's a modern baseball story. But it's kind of different in that he envisions a scenario which is spooky, Rob, because it's so much like what's happening with the shortened season we had this year because of COVID, and they didn't start till almost midsummer, and they went to only 60 games, and now I won't say anymore, but Dexter's story almost echoes that. It's weird.
I haven't read that one yet, so I don't know.
Weird.
Wow,
it's weird like that. Okay. So now Okay, I've got one last short to fill, and because Dexter helped us out, because Derek was so kind as to give us Brooklyn Beatdown, it was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. It's not the first sports story I've written. I wrote an actual Boston Red Sox story, Rob, for an anthology that came out maybe 10, 11 years ago called Fenway Stories.
Right. Yeah, I think I remember doing the logo for that. Yeah.
You did, right? Yeah. And so you helped with the guy get the cover done and everything else.
Yeah.
So anyways, it was like, okay, well, I've got a baseball story, I've got a boxing story. What do I know? All right, what do I know? What can I do? And then it became not so much what I know as I can remember listening on television documentaries of a lot of the servicemen who came home from World War II, who were wounded and lost limbs. All right, and one of the more famous was about a pitcher for the professional leagues who lost an arm, and he came back home and literally went back into sports and played for a few seasons with one arm. He would literally hold his mitt in his hand under his arm while he pitched. And after he'd throw the ball, he'd put the mitt on in case he had to field. All right. And it blew me away. The whole concept of that attitude of never giving up, of always sticking with it. And so I'm thinking of that, and I'm thinking, of what's been going on and the advancements in prosthetics since World War II, from Korea and Vietnam and whatever. And obviously the one conflict that I am personally familiar with was Vietnam. And though I had never written anything else about that since I came home, I found myself thinking about what would happen if a young football player with a nice future ahead of him during Vietnam lost a leg and came home with a leg missing, and he gets a prosthetic. And I'm not going to give away too much more of it, but the title of the story is pretty much almost self-evident, but it's called The Kicker. And it was a different kind of thing for me to write because Rob, as I was writing it, it was like easy for me to see some things that I had long since not thought about. And it's really not, the war isn't there. My experiences in the country aren't there. This starts in Walter Reed.
Right.
with him, recovering. But at the same time, there are moments and incidences, which I'm not going to give away, which also reflect the social attitudes of the time.
Yeah.
And I hadn't honestly thought those out until I was writing the story. And I came to a specific scene, and my wife was my first reader. When she read that section, turned around and looked at me, and she went, "Oh my God, I'd forgotten all those things." I said, "Yeah, so had I," until I was actually writing and they resurfaced and whatever. So in the end, I'm happy with the story. I think it has, a message in and of itself. I got to like the characters a great deal writing the story, and I hope that fans will enjoy it. Again, it's one of those things where it surprised even me, and that's why I like writing so much. All right, it's catharsis in a lot of ways. So there you go. And I want to get back to, we had talked about After All American Sports Stories. I did mention the Masked Rider and Jason Wren being involved as illustrators, but I also should mention that the writers involved with that particular volume include Thomas McNulty, Paul Findlay, and we've got a great Masked Rider novella by our own dear pal Gordon Demowski, which he's been sitting on for the longest time. I'm very happy to say that now we've got an illustrator on the book, and we have a cover. Shane Evans of Australia had done a cover for us over a year ago now. So once Jason's finished with his illustrations, that should be moving along rather quickly. And speaking of Gordon Demowski, I do want to mention this, Rob, because I want Gordon to hear it when he listens to the show. Last year, Gordon approached us about the possibilities of doing an anthology series based on Conan Doyle's other character, Professor George Challenger.
Right, yeah.
And Gordon actually created a Bible for it that we would use. Right. And I'm very happy to say, as of now, we have that volume filled. We have 4 George Challenger stories. And once again, Ron's on the hunt for an illustrator. I'm trying to think off the top of my head because I don't have the notes right here. But Gordon did a story. Let's see. Barbara Moran did a story. Michael Panush did a story. And the last story I got in, believe it or not, was from Samantha Lionheart. So it's a great volume. It's a great volume. Okay. Believe me, people are going to enjoy this. Now I've just got to find an art team. Please let me find an art team.
That's how things go.
Yeah. So anyway, hey, I finished this whole section with naturally we've got lots of other books waiting in the wings. That's what I just said.
As always. As always.
Once we get the art teams, we've got some really awesome novels and anthologies coming out your way for the rest of the year and way into 2021. So again, thanks a lot, for bearing with us. And now, believe it or not, this month we've got 2 questions. And each is in 2 parts. So go ahead and read the first question, Rob. All right.
All right. This is from John Simcoe. And what are the pros and cons of working with pre-existing characters versus new creations and concepts? Okay. Well, okay. Pro, with established characters, the look of and I'm going to speak to this from the artist side.
Yeah.
With established characters, the look of the character is usually already set. It's a matter of just referencing the previous pieces. That's the pro. Now, the con, if the previous look is not something that fits your style, it can be rough figuring out how to get it to conform and still look like and feel like the characters. That's the con for that one. Now, if it's a new character, there's a lot more work needed to be sure you're conforming to the writer's idea about what the character looks like. Pro, if it's a new character, you get to set the look for the character for yourself and future artists working on them. That's actually a lot of fun. And this is an opportunity to encourage writers to have reference for artists portraying their character. Think of an actor or a certain look you want the character to have and either send images along or point the artist in the right direction. This goes for the bad guys too. If you got a certain look you want for them as well, point the artist in the right direction or send along some reference work for them. Same thing goes for settings as well. If there's a certain warehouse or some other setting that you want the characters to be in, send that along as well, or put in a link to send them a link to that they can find it online. That's always a good thing to do. It's very, very helpful.
The more reference any of our writers can provide us that we can share with the artists, it makes things a whole lot easier. I mean, the classic example of that was what we just talked about, the Jenna Coyne mysteries. All right. I mean, here I am. I'm going to have Ted Hammond doing, the illustration. And as anybody who's seen Ted's work know how beautiful it really is. So I immediately wanted Jenna and her police officer boyfriend, all right, Conrad Martin, or Martin Conrad. I'm trying the character's name.
I haven't read it, so I can't say.
Right. The point being is there was a way that they looked that was, unique to how Robert wrote the stories. So before I even went to Ted, I went to Robert first and said, hey, look, I've got an artist lined up to do the cover. Who do you see? If you were casting, who would be, Martin, who would be Jenna? And he immediately wrote back and gave me artists, actors that he saw while he was writing. So It was nothing for me to go online, find those actors, take 5 or 6 different pictures of each. And when I went to Ted and we talked about the compositions, I sent those along. Well, when you look at the cover, he realized them perfectly. He did a great job. So yeah, that really does help. And my approach to this from the editor and writer's perspective, okay, as like you said, pros and cons, working with pre-existing characters or new creations. All right, look. When I'm working with pre-existing characters, one of the things that Rob and I have here at Airship 27 is this caveat that you have to keep the original classic characters the way they appeared in their original settings back in the 30s and 40s. That's paramount, all right? So obviously you don't have that restriction when you're doing new characters. If they're your creation, then we're not going to tell you how they act or don't act. You're telling us. As an editor, I'm reading this and finding out. Where that becomes a con, though, and then this is important, John, where it becomes a con is if you want to give me a Secret Agent X novel or a Black Bat novel, it's a whole lot easier for me to market and sell it because they have a fan base. This is, this is pulp fandom. If you come to me with, the mysterious, Miss Lucy Bender or whatever, all right, witch detective, I've got a challenge because nobody knows who she is. Nobody knows whether it's worth taking their time and money to support this and whatever. So in this particular case, new creations are that much more work for an editor, strictly from a marketing perspective, okay? If I read a book, I like it, I enjoy it, all well and good, but I've still got to go out there and try to help sell it, whereas the older characters pretty much sell themselves.
Yep, they do.
All right, so what's the second part of John's question?
What's the most common bottleneck in publishing a new pulp novel after the first draft is handed in, of course? Well, we've already kind of talked about that. In the case of Airship 27, it's finding interior artists or artists, period. Though sometimes it can be finding the right cover artist, yeah. In any case, there's understandably a limited number of professional level folks willing to work within our very limited budget for remuneration. So it makes it kind of tough for us to find folks. Now, the pro of this is that it's so much fun to do pulps that it's not impossible to find people to work under the conditions we work under. Some of them do it just for the pure pleasure of it. It's nice that there's a little money involved, and it is a lot of fun doing pulp characters, new or old, either one. But that's the bottleneck we run into.
That's the visual bottleneck, and again, Airship 27 is. And I won't say unique because I'm seeing, Rob, I'm starting to see some new publishers coming into the game now that are using illustrations, where,
Okay, good.
as of, maybe last year, we were one of the few, one or two, but I am now getting books to review that have interior illustrations, and it makes me really feel happy that other publishers are willing to go this route. Okay. Whereas there's one other literary bottleneck that Rob and I cross over every now and then as well. After we've assembled the art and Rob has assembled and designed the book, sometimes it's a case of who's going to proofread it and how much time do they have to proofread it. Okay. And that sometimes can be a bottleneck. All right. And not so much for, I want to say, the single novel books as opposed to the anthologies, because with the anthologies, with the single novel, we get one proofreader. He reads the book, finds mistakes, this or that, sends them to Rob. Rob makes corrections, and then the writer gets final look. It's a 1-2 step that's very easy to follow. But when we're doing anthologies, that bottleneck travels from the proofreader to the anthology, because Rob will send out 4 PDFs and we'll have 1 or 2 or 3 guys send them right back within a day and say, here you go, blah, blah, blah. But where's writer number 4? And he's like falling off the world. Or, oh, I'm on vacation for the next 2 weeks. I'll check this out when I come home. What? It's like,
but that's, we have no deadlines here. So, yeah.
That's life. That's life. That's
legitimate.
Right. So proofreading can be a bottleneck at times.
We've been very fortunate this year. It has really not been. We thought we were with the latest Sherlock Holmes. We thought we'd run into a problem, but it was just that the last guy to send his in was being very meticulous, and just as we were getting ready to contact him, he sent it in. So that's how that goes.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much where we're at. And again, we deal with this so much on a regular basis that we understand it. And like Rob said, our rule of thumb's always been no deadlines here at Airship 27. And so if and when we're stymied by not having artwork or the proofread is taking longer than we expected, trust me, John, we just move on to the next book while that's happening. Okay. We never sit here idly waiting for one book, which at any given time, we'll have 5 or 6 books in various forms of production down the queue.
Yeah. Which brings up another point with artists. When I ran into this just recently on one of our books, when we assign a book to an artist, especially a new one who hasn't worked with us before, sometimes when they send the artwork back in, it's labeled illustration number 1. And I'll go, okay, which book's this for? Which story? Because I've got like 5 or 6 things, it's like juggling. I've got 5 or 6 balls in the air at a time. And I don't know necessarily. There have been times when I don't know who the artist is on a book until I get that first illustration.
Right. I mean,
nice if they were.
Yeah. One of the things I try to do, and again, you can't blame individual artists who
no
who don't understand the concept of how we work. And once they do, it becomes a piece of cake.
Right.
But I'll usually tell a new artist that's assigned to a book, oh, by the way, when you send in, composition roughs or whatever, send them to both me and Rob. Now, then the reason obviously is because I have looked at all the books. I know who's on all the books, and Rob doesn't. So all of a sudden, one day I'll pull up some email and I'll see a rough composition for a book that I know Rob is not aware is in production. So when I reply to the artist, if he sent it to both me and Rob, when I reply to that artist in regard to the composition of what I like or don't like or whatever, at the bottom of that, I'll put, Rob, this is for book such and such, start a new folder. And Rob immediately starts that folder. And from that point on, every time a new illustration comes in for that project, he knows what project it is.
Yep. I actually have a card system where I will write down when we have a new one. It's got several different places on it. I'll write down the title of the book, and then who the writers are, and who the artists are, and so on and so forth. And sometimes all I've got is the name, the title of the book, and maybe the writer, and then I have to leave the other things blank. So I will have the name of the story, but I don't know who's drawing it yet. And then suddenly you find somebody to draw it, either the cover or the interiors, and you haven't told me who it is yet.
Right.
And then suddenly I'm getting illustrations from them and I'm going, and it's marked illustration 1. And I'm going, okay, which book? But and that's not their fault. They don't always realize that, I'm on, like I said, I've got 5 or 6 books in the air at a time in different stages. So I don't know what they all are. I haven't, and most of them, if I'm not drawing them, I don't read them.
Well, there have been times when I've gotten confused myself, because we'll end up with like six or 7 books, and somebody sends me something and I'm going, wait a minute, what was that for? It's like, okay, and I got to go back to my files. But like I said, for the most part, this generally happens with new artists the first few times they work with us. And then once they do, again, because I'll just politely remind them and say, hey, look, always send to me and Rob. Always send to me and Rob. That way, we're not repeating each other. I don't have to share art with Rob that he hasn't already seen or whatever. And if people have inquiries for stories or submissions and they just go to Rob, that's not helping me at all. Rob has to then send them to me.
And here's another caveat to that is that, any minute a hard drive could fail or email could go down or, if they've sent it to both of us, Ron's got it and I've got it. If he loses it, I've got a copy. If I lose it, he's got a copy. Now, I'm real good at backing things up,
right?
But I do it like once a week. So if I've gotten several things during the week and I still haven't backed up and my hard drive goes down, that week's worth of stuff is gone. Yeah.
Oh, please.
So,
please.
But in some cases, I actually have triple backups. I have the original, I have a backup, and then I have a second backup that which is a drive that I take with me when I travel, so that I can work on stuff. But
that's an old classic business joke, Rob. You know that? Yeah, at the local, at the local stockholders meeting, the CEO got up and said, "Redundancy is one of our biggest problems this year, and I can't repeat that enough times."
That's about right.
Okay. All right. So, all right. And so we get another 2-parter, and I'm going to read both parts because the first half of this had me a little concerned, and I think the writer got it and sent me the second part. And it's from writer Gerald Welch. All right, who, by the way, Rob, is the gentleman who has continued the Warren Murphy Destroyer series.
Oh, okay.
Williams and Chen. All right.
Right. Yeah, I was not aware that's who that was. Okay.
Yeah. He was, before Murphy passed away, he chose him as his heir.
Yeah, I heard about that, but I didn't associate the name. Yeah, that's cool.
It's a legacy series, and he's doing a great job with it. The books are fantastic, and is now a member of the Pulp Factory group as well. And this is what he writes: how do you separate traditional pulp from the future of pulp? How do you separate traditional pulp from the future of pulp? Or what does pulp look like 20 years from now? And, my answer to that is probably simplistic, and I'm not trying to be that as such, but honestly, because of what we've experienced, with the resurgence of new pulp, is very much that pulp is pulp, and it's going to remain pulp. There's a core concept of what pulp fiction is.
Right.
And I don't think that's ever changed. I think from the days of the 30s and 40s, it's populist fare. It continued to be populist fare when it became paperbacks after World War II, when it became men's adventure magazines that our buddy Bob Dice is an authority on. And now it's shifted gears into even best-selling novels by the thriller writers of today, the Stephen Kings and the Tom Clancy, whatever. So populist fare / pulp fiction is the same. But what has changed is the platform we bring it to you on. And that's Amazon, that's print on demand, that's Kindle books. You can read it you can read a pulp book on your cell phone today, all right, with all these ebooks and whatever. So my thought being, Gerald, is as we move into the future, whatever new electronic, media is born or invented that allows us to share stories is going to take pulp with it. I think there'll be other probably other forms of genre that will surface, that will go up and down. But for the most part, the storytelling will remain the same. Action, adventure, romance, all those things that entertain the hell out of people is Pulp Fiction. And whatever technological marvels spread that further in 20 years, I'd like to see more Pulp movies. There have been a lot of them, but I'd like to see more Pulp TV series, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we're going to see all of that happen. What are your thoughts, buddy?
Okay, first of all, that's what I wrote. You said everything I was wanting to say, except, okay, I'm betting it will depend on the kind of stories people will like to read or be told. Given what I'm seeing these days, I'm betting that in 20 years, many Pulp style stories will be told in video game format. Which now has a big or bigger audience than movies right now.
Right.
But that's just a wild guess. But I'm betting that's where this is going to kind of move to. Now, there may be other things that pop up between now and then as well, but that's my prognostication. Okay. People will always want to be told fast-paced stories with clear good guys and bad guys in them. Though again, with the trends I'm seeing, gender will likely be less dominated by male and have more female protagonists as well. You'll note we're getting more and more female protagonists in pulp-like stories now. So that's where I kind of see it going.
Yeah. It's funny to talk about trends because recently, and your feedback is definitely welcome. I do this review column, and so I get X number of books every day in the mail from people wanting me to review their books on my Pulp Fiction review blog, and I am seeing a really wonderful resurgence in Western paperbacks.
Really?
Oh my Lord! Paul Bishop and his buddy Robert Prosh created this new line. I'm trying to think of what it's called. I had it, and Wolfpack Publishing. Okay. Yeah. So they created a series of books by an A.W. Hart, house name. But they've got people on board to write them like Chuck Dixon. Nancy Holder recently wrote one. Okay. And then they started this female Western hero. All right. The Black Rose, a gun-toting nut in Southern California. And I'm like, what? And then our dear old buddy, Terrence McCauley, after writing several, noir thrillers and spy stories, now he's writing this Aaron Mackey Western series.
Yeah.
I've read the first one and I absolutely loved it. He's a hell of a writer. Are coming back, at least in Pulp Fiction. Westerns are coming back, and I could not be happier. Let me tell you, it's good stuff.
I thought that genre was pretty dead. I mean, it used to be everywhere. When you and I were kids, there were Western TV shows, there were movies, they were the big thing at the box office, and then suddenly, it comes the 70s, and they completely fall off the map. There's one or two TV series that last for a little while into the 70s, but after that, they're dead. Yeah. But I think it's like everything else. It goes through phases. I think they kind of wore it out, but it does have it's like science fiction, and you can tell different types of stories using some of the tropes from Westerns. Yeah. So maybe we're coming to a point where the kind of stories that can be told in Westerns are a little more popular now. So it's like I said, it's like any other genre. It's just a way to tell interesting stories. So, yep.
All right. Okay, hey, John and Gerald, thanks so much for the questions. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, got me thinking.
Yeah, and that's the reason that we love them so much, because Rob and I can get into these discussions. And please, okay, if you're listening to the show on YouTube, there's that comment section below. All right. Obviously, hit the subscribe button. Definitely want you to subscribe and follow along every month. But any of your comments are really appreciated. All right. On the discussion, what you think the future of pulp is going to be like. And do you see genres happening? Let us know.
Let's join us on Pulp Factory Group or, the Airship 27 Facebook pages.
Yeah.
Come in and start a conversation there too.
Right.
Yeah.
And please, if you have questions that spring from any of these episodes, all right, when we announce the next episode, which will be sometimes later in November, by all means, put them down because you really make the show that much better for us. Thank you so much.
Yep.
All right, we are coming to a close. Anything else you want to mention, please?
Two things.
Go.
Okay. Number one, I had an occasion this week where I heard secondhand that one of our customers online had gone on and purchased one of our PDFs, and the whole process just fell apart for him. He paid for it on PayPal, and then you're supposed to automatically be taken to the website where it automatically downloads. Well, none of that happened for him. He paid, and then none of the other stuff happened. And apparently, from what he was saying, he also couldn't contact me with the link on the website. So I'm going, I wonder what's going on here. But I got a hold of him. The person that contacted me about it gave me his email address. I got a hold of him. I got him his book, but I also checked the website, told him I would check and see. I know there are some browsers out there that choke when it takes you to PayPal. I don't know why it does that. And I don't know which ones it are. He apparently used Google Chrome, I think he said. He actually didn't say which browser, but he said Google had flagged our website or the transaction as a problem of some sort. But I don't know whether it was Chrome or whatever he used. But sometimes the browser will choke when it goes to PayPal. Immediately contact me. My email address is there, and it's robmdavis@mac.com. If you have any kind of problem, as soon as I can, I will fix that problem for you and get you your book. Each and every one of you readers is important to us. If you want one of our books, we want to make sure that you get it. Okay, even if it's just for $3 for a PDF, we want you to have the book. Okay.
Amen to that.
So that's point number one. And number two, we're coming up here in a couple of weeks. If you haven't already, go out and vote. I have an old saying I quote every election season. If you don't vote, you can't complain about how things come out, though I usually substitute a more colorful word for complain. But go out and vote. I don't care who you vote for, vote. It's important to vote.
I'm kind of happy. I mean, I've got 3 siblings, 2 younger brothers and a sister, a brother in Massachusetts, a brother in Vermont, and a sister in Florida. And the other day we were sharing an email, catching up with each other, on what everybody's doing. And all of us have voted. Every single one of us. I'm very proud of my family. And, I turned 21 when I was in Vietnam. I mentioned Vietnam earlier in the show, and that's where I turned 21. And that experience taught me a whole lot about my country and my love for it. And I have never missed an election. I have never missed voting. Okay. And hey, look, do it. Okay. Just do it. Just please. That's all I want to say. Yeah. Get out there and do it. Be an American.
Yeah. Don't care who you vote for.
It's your right.
Make your voice heard.
Yeah.
I turned 18 the year 18 became the age to vote in president. So I have voted every election. So I think I may have missed one when I first moved to Kansas City many, many years ago, but I voted every chance I got. I mean, even just the little local elections, because I figure it's my duty as a citizen to make my voice heard. If you don't do, like I said, if you don't vote, you can't complain.
Amen. Amen. Hey, the only thing I want to bring up before we wrap the show up for myself is that all of you who still like Pulp Comics. Be on the lookout. All right. You might want to get a hold of your comic shop because Moonstone Books, after almost 3.5 years, is releasing Black Bat, Domino Lady, Danger Coast to Coast. Actually 2 miniseries. One was 3 issues. The other one was 4, plus a bonus Ivy Frost story that's never been published. So I think it's going to come close to about 185 pages, Rob.
Wow.
So, yeah. And
that's pretty good book.
Yeah. And it has the Doug Klaba cover, which is to die for. It's absolutely beautiful. And they solicited it via Diamond for a November release. I'm hoping that we're talking maybe mid-November, which still gives some of you out there a chance to pick up the phone and call your comic shop because look,
because they can still order it even at this late date.
They can.
They can up their order.
Isn't Marvel or DC, all right? So the odds are good. Most comic shops won't order it unless you ask for it.
Right.
So by all means, Danger Coast to Coast, Moonstone Comics. I'm very happy to see this book. It features 4 different artists that I had a great time working with. A lot of class. I mean, Black Bat and Domino Lady, the predominant characters, Rob. But again, like I mentioned, in the adventure, you have Kygor, the Jungle Lord, the Phantom Detective, Jim Anthony, Super Detective. Anybody I could throw into this thing, I did.
You threw the kitchen sink at this one, didn't you?
I did. It's a fun comic. So if you're at all interested, go check it out. And there you go. And now, as ever.
Okay, look out. Here it comes.
Here it comes. All right. All right. So anyways, all right. Jack has a long day at work and he can't leave the office till really late, till finally it's time to close up, and he looks at the clock and it's like about 20 minutes to 10. That's it. He's had it. He shuts up the clock and goes outside, and before heading back to his apartment, he sees the local bar across the street. So he walks in and he goes over and he sits down next to this blonde and stares up just as the 10 o'clock news is coming on. Now, the news crew was covering a story about a man on a ledge of a large building preparing to jump. Now, the blonde, a little tipsy with a few drinks, looks at Jack and says, "You think he'll jump?" Jack says, "You know what? I bet he will." The blonde replied, "Well, I'll bet he won't." Jack takes out $30 and puts it on the bar and says, "You're on." So just as the blonde is putting her money on the bar, the guy does a swan dive off the building, falling to his death. The blonde's very upset and hands over her $30 to Jack. But he puts up his hand and says, she goes, no, you won. Here's the money. He said, "Look, I have to confess, I can't take your money. I saw this earlier on the 5 o'clock news, and I knew he would jump." The blonde looks at him and smiles and goes, "I did too, but I didn't think he'd do it again."
That's sad.
And there you have it. There you have it. Yeah, 1 hour gone. Disappear. Hey, thanks.
You can't get this back, folks. It's too late.
Thanks so much for signing in as ever. It's always a ball to share this hour with all of you. Rob.
Okay. All right. This is Chief Engineer Rob Davis signing off.
And Captain Ron, as always, down ship.